Hi. It has been over 2 years since I have read anything for Mad Women in the Attic's online version of the Barbara Project. And the reason for that is that I was not sure that people were able to access the videos because we were running into some issues related to copyrights. And also because the project was originally aimed at being accessible, having our acts of reading aloud be accessible to people in psychiatric hospitals in our local community. And during the pandemic, we we came up with this idea of reading online. We were working with a local psychiatric facility, but we were sort of told that the nurses or the psychiatric nurses at the facility were not using our videos and not really sharing them. And then we had the issue of the copyrights, which made us take titles off of our videos so that they wouldn't be searchable, so that our videos wouldn't be kicked out of YouTube. And in that process, it just sort of felt like we were not going to be able to access a readership. However, thanks to one viewer reader who contacted me, and hello, because I think you'll be watching this and seeing this at some point, I found out that actually some of the videos were being watched. And also, I did find out recently that some of the copyright laws around at least the Nancy Drew series are in the process of changing for some of the books. So given that, I have at least determined that I'm going to dedicate myself to trying to certainly finish the book that I started 2 years ago that has been moved to various places on my various shelves, and I'm going to read today. So the chapter I'm going to start with, actually, sadly, I do remember the story I was reading, but it's not fresh in my mind the way it would have been had I been reading this and continued to finish it back in 2020, which is really what I should have done. But I will read it now, and I'm going to just adjust my position a bit. Make this work. Okay. So I will be picking up, I'm continuing on with the clue in the crumbling wall of the Nancy Drew mystery series. And I'm going to pick up with chapter 20, which is titled Mehearty's Plight. Closely pursued by the barking dogs, the three girls raced madly to the front wall of the estate. Scrambling safely over it, they paused, gasping for breath. What a narrow escape, Nancy said, shaking. Hector Keep was after me. Did he recognize you? Bess asked her, worried. He doesn't really know me, and I kept my face covered as I ran. What did you do with the metal box? Bess wanted to know. I hid it, but not these. Cautiously, Nancy produced the photographs and the diary from beneath her sweater. I still have the evidence. You're wonderful, said George. Well, what's next? We're a long way from the boat. Having caught their breaths, the girls debated what to do. They were worried about Mehearty and what might have happened to him. Though the beach was not more than half a mile away, they had no way of reaching it. We'll have to return to town and rent another boat, Nancy concluded. Walking as fast as they could, the trio made their way to the main highway. They were a long distance from River Heights, and Bess pointed out the bus service was infrequent along this route. Last time I was here, I thought one would never come, she reminisced. That wasn't very long ago either, but it seems like a year to me. The girls waited patiently for 20 minutes, hoping a bus would appear. They were almost in despair when Nancy observed a familiar coupe coming down the road. Lieutenant Master's car, she cried, holding up her hand in signal. Now we'll get a ride. The automobile came to a standstill at the side of the road. The young officer expressed delight at seeing Nancy and meeting her friends. Hop in, she invited them. There isn't much room, but I think we all can squeeze in. Seeing you out here makes me think you've been to Heath Castle, the lieutenant said, a twinkle in her eye. We have been, Nancy admitted. I suppose I ought to tell you everything, but it's a professional secret. I understand. The attractive young officer laughed. Tell me one thing, though. Is there any chance of your finding Floriana before it's too late? I have several good leads, the girl answered. In fact, George and Bess and I were following one this morning. Mehearty came with us. Mehearty? Yes, he's the singing clam digger of the Muskoka River. I'm sort of responsible for his nickname, Nancy explained. He used to sing, "Mehearty lad and Mehearty men," so when I was a little girl, I called him Mehearty man. And now everyone in River Heights calls him Mehearty, said Bess. The poor old fellow. We left him on the beach. He's probably in the hands of the crooks by now. Bess is kind of nervous. What's that? Exclaimed the policewoman. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Bess remorseful looked at Nancy. The Drew girl explained as much as she felt to be necessary and asked the officer if she thought a police boat might be sent out to rescue Mehearty. Why, of course, Lieutenant Masters promised. I'll call headquarters as soon as we get to River Heights. She remarked to Nancy that she had expected to stop at the Drew home to discuss the problem of Joan Fenimore and her playmate, Jetty Hooker. She promised me she wouldn't play with Jetty anymore, said Nancy. I'm inclined to think she may have tried not to, the officer said slowly, but, well, here's the story. Jetty really causes me more worry than a dozen other boys on my list. What has he done this time? Nancy asked curiously, though she thought she knew part of the answer already. Ooh. He hasn't been in school for 3 days. It does no good to talk to his mother. I'm convinced she's an unsuitable person to look after him. I'll say she is, George burst out and told Miss Masters about the clothes stolen from her and how they suspected Jetty and his mother of being in possession of them. I'm afraid the boy is a thief at heart, the lieutenant sighed. Ugh. Yesterday I caught him at Weatherby's curio shop trying to sell a fair-sized pearl. Okay, now I'm really interested. You think he stole it? Cried Nancy, thinking of the one taken from her. I'm not sure. When I took Jetty home, his mother said she knew nothing about the pearl. Jetty claimed that Joan Fenimore had given it to him, but Joan denied the story. So you see, it's all very confusing. What a pity Joan has to be mixed up in such things, said Nancy, shocked. She's too nice a child. Jetty's a very bad influence for her, the policewoman sighed. Mrs. Fenimore realizes this only too well. She's willing to send the little girl away for a while if I can get a place for her to stay. That shouldn't be difficult, said Bess. I've had no luck so far, though I've made several inquiries. Nancy, do you know anyone who would take the child? I'll talk to our housekeeper about it, the Drew girl offered. It's possible we could work out something. She has relatives who own a farm. That would be ideal for a while, since the child loves nature, said the officer as she stopped the coupe in front of the Drew home. And now, if I may use your telephone, I'll call headquarters and see about getting a boat rescue to that man, Mehearty. Lieutenant Masters called the police station and talked with the sergeant on duty. The force is working short-handed, she explained after putting down the receiver. Only one man can go. Will you girls accompany him so that you can bring back the rented boat? Yes, we'll be glad to, the three said together and thanked the lieutenant for her help. As it developed, Nancy was not to be included in the rescue party. She and her friends were about to leave the house when Mr. Drew drove up. Don't go away, Nancy, he called urgently to his daughter. I have something important to talk over with you. Do you mind if I don't go with you? Nancy asked the other girls. No, not if there's a policeman along, Bess replied, and George nodded. Let me know what happens, Nancy requested as the cousins went off with Lieutenant Masters. I'm dreadfully anxious about Mehearty. The woman drove Bess and George to the it must be police dock. So the text is missing. And there said goodbye. Soon policeman Carney arrived in a boat and the girls climbed in. It was a fast craft and reached the area of Heath Castle in a much shorter time than the other one which Nancy had piloted. To the girls' relief, the rented boat was still anchored in the river, but Mehearty was not in it, nor was he or his rowboat visible on the beach. He wouldn't have had time to row home, said Bess, worried, and we didn't pass him As we came up, do you suppose those men? Whispered George grimly. The girls told Policeman Carney they were afraid the old clam digger might have met with foul play and asked him to go ashore with them. He anchored his speedboat and the three climbed into the rowboat it was hauling. Reaching the beach, the searchers started an intensive hunt. They were just about to despair of finding the missing man when George spied the form of the old sailor lying near the entrance to the cloister. For a moment, she was fearful something dreadful had happened to him, but he suddenly sat up and looked at her. Thought you'd never come, he muttered sleepily. George thought he was only sleepy until she noticed blood on his face and shirt. Mehearty, you're hurt, she exclaimed. Her cry brought Bess and Policeman Carney leaping to her side. The old clam digger stood up and insisted he was all right, though he seemed somewhat unsteady. I'd be proud to get knocked out any time for Miss Nancy Drew, he murmured, and nobody can say anything against her. Mehearty looked around. Where is she? He demanded. Home, Bess replied. Home? The man blinked. How'd she get there? Not through here, he pointed to the cloister opening. No, by the road, explained George. Come, Mehearty. We'll go back to River Heights and talk on the way. Where's your boat? Those rascals, what give me a bloody nose took her, the old sailor explained. Policeman Carney made sure the man was all right. Then he said if the others did not mind, he would hurry back to River Heights alone. He waited long enough to be sure their boat started before speeding away. Now, Mehearty, tell us what happened, George demanded as they skimmed down the stream toward Campbell's Landing. I was digging for clams, the old sailor began, when a couple of men and a boy seemed to come right out of nowhere. They asked me, who was in the Heath Gardens? You didn't tell them, Bess exclaimed. Yes, afore I thought up, I said, Nancy Drew and a couple of her friends. It was a mistake to tell them. I learned that quick enough. Right away, they told me to clear out and said they would go after the girls. What did you do then? George asked. I tried to argue them out of it, but they was stubborn as mules. Then one of them said something about Miss Nancy being dangerous and she'd better mind her own business. I up and punched him on the nose for that. You were nice to come to Nancy's defense, said Bess, but there were three against you. You're right. We had a tussle. Afraid I lost the battle, the clam digger added sheepishly, but I come to pretty soon. In fact, just in time to see one of them rascals taking my boat. Mehearty told how he had noticed one of the other men going through the section of wall with the stone steps beyond and decided to follow him. But the poor old sailor hadn't gotten no farther than the opening before everything went black before him. Later I come to, he said, but I couldn't seem to move for a while. Somewhere in the garden I heard two men talking. I'm glad Miss Nancy is home safe, for one of them said he was going to have her arrested. Arrested, cried Bess. Why? I didn't hear. I guess I must have kind of gone off again, the old man replied. We must warn Nancy right away, George declared, pushing the boat to its utmost speed. Unaware that her chums were racing to caution her of trouble, Nancy, in the meantime, had been eating a late luncheon and talking with her father at home. Eagerly, she showed him the photographs and diaries she had removed from the metal box. She spoke of the mysterious Cinderella footprint embedded in the crumbling wall at Heath Gardens and gave a vivid account of her adventures with Cobb Biggs and Hector Keep. You certainly had no dull moments, Mr. Drew commented. Your news dwarfs what I have to tell you. Is it something that will help solve the mystery? Nancy asked eagerly. It may, depending on how you use the information. The girl squirmed impatiently. Don't keep me in suspense, she pleaded. What is the news, Dad? It concerns Floriana's missing nurse. Emily Foster? Yes, Mr. Drew nodded. After a long search, I've located her. And here's the best part of it all. Tomorrow morning, she'll be glad to see you and tell you all she knows. So that is the end of chapter 20, and I will stop the video here. Actually,